Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm about to share with you a story that will make you question everything about family, loyalty, and the hidden price of kindness. Have you ever spent years sacrificing your own happiness, only to be repaid with betrayal and cold indifference? What if, after giving a decade of your life to care for someone, the people you thought were family turned their backs on you, and worse, tried to take everything from you? But what if I told you that buried beneath the dust and forgotten floorboards of an old house lay a secret so powerful, it would change everything? This is the story of Amanda, a woman who gave everything without expecting anything in return, only to discover, too late, that the real battle begins after the funeral. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and let me tell you how one letter, hidden away for years, turned a forgotten caretaker into the woman no one saw coming. Now let's begin. Let me tell you about a woman named Amanda. You wouldn't think twice if you saw her on the street. Simple clothes, soft voice, the kind of woman who never makes a fuss. But behind that quiet smile is a story filled with sacrifice, betrayal, and a kind of strength that most people will never understand. Amanda was in her early 60s, living in a small town called Pine Creek, when this chapter of her life began. Years ago, she married a man named Chad. She thought she was building a family, a future, something stable. But life rarely turns out the way we imagine. When their marriage started to crack, when things got hard, Chad didn't stay and fight. He walked away. One day, without warning, he disappeared, leaving Amanda to fend for herself. She never heard from him again. But the story doesn't end there. Because when Chad left, he didn't just leave Amanda. He also left behind his mother, Marie, a strong woman who had spent her life working her fingers to the bone, raising 3 children on her own after losing her husband in an accident. 10 years ago, Marie suffered a severe stroke. It left her paralyzed, unable to speak clearly or care for herself. And when that happened, Amanda could have left too. She could have packed her bags and started over somewhere else. But she didn't. While Marie's own children, Lauren, Brad, and Chad, went on with their lives, chasing careers, new relationships, and freedom, Amanda stayed. They were too busy throwing parties, vacationing in other cities, showing off their so-called happiness. None of them had time to look back at the woman who raised them. None of them wanted to deal with the weight of her care. So Amanda did it. She took that weight onto her own shoulders and carried it for a full decade. She cooked every meal, bathed Marie, helped her sit up, changed her clothes, cleaned the house, managed the medications, stayed up through the endless nights when Marie couldn't sleep. Day after day, year after year, Amanda sacrificed everything. Her peace, her freedom, her own health, all for a woman who wasn't even her blood relative. She wasn't paid. She wasn't praised. She was invisible to the world. But she kept going because that's who Amanda was. And then, one quiet morning, it all came to an end. Marie passed away peacefully in her sleep. Amanda was the one who found her, the one who called the doctor, the one who arranged the funeral. And when the family finally showed up, Lauren and Brad sweeping into town like royalty, they didn't shed a single tear. They didn't ask how Amanda was holding up. Instead, they rushed to the lawyer's office, impatient to hear what was written in the will. Amanda sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded in her lap, her heart heavy but calm. She wasn't expecting much. But even then, nothing could have prepared her for what she heard next. Marie had left everything, every house, every piece of land, every penny in her savings account, to her biological children. Lauren got one house. Brad got another. They even split the leftover savings 50-50. And Amanda, after 10 years of sleepless nights, hospital visits, spoon-feeding and wiping tears, all she got was the deed to an old, crumbling house on Main Street, a place barely standing in the worst part of Pine Creek. Lauren barely hid her smirk when the lawyer finished reading. She leaned over and whispered, "Well, I guess loyalty doesn't pay, does it?" Amanda didn't respond. She simply stood up, nodded politely, and left the room. But what no one knew, what Lauren and Brad never imagined, was that Amanda's story wasn't over. That rundown house they laughed at would soon reveal a secret none of them saw coming. Because sometimes, the people you underestimate the most are the ones who will surprise you the hardest. The day of Marie's funeral was gray and cold, the kind of day that feels heavy even without grief. The sky hung low over Pine Creek, clouds pressing down like the weight Amanda had carried for years. But inside that church there was no warmth, no tenderness, only cold glances, whispered conversations, and thinly veiled impatience. Amanda stood quietly in the back, her black coat simple and worn. She had arranged every detail of the funeral herself, chosen the flowers, prepared the program, made sure Marie's favorite hymn would play as they lowered her into the ground. She had done it alone because no one else bothered to ask. Lauren arrived late, dressed in designer black, her makeup flawless. Brad showed up shortly after, too busy tapping on his phone to even look at the casket. Not once did either of them meet Amanda's eyes. Not once did they say thank you. When the service ended, Amanda stood near the entrance as guests trickled out. She didn't expect much, not condolences, not recognition, but still a small part of her hoped that maybe, after everything, someone would see her. Instead, she overheard Lauren's sharp voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "She was just the housekeeper," Lauren scoffed to one of the relatives. "Can you believe Mom left her that dump on Main Street? Honestly, it's almost embarrassing." Amanda's hands clenched at her sides. Housekeeper. That's all she had ever been to them. Not a daughter-in-law, not family. Just a servant who had wasted 10 years cleaning up after the woman they claimed to love. As if 10 years of broken nights, hospital visits, and spoon-feeding could be reduced to that single, ugly word. The bitterness burned in Amanda's chest like wildfire, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Later that afternoon, the real show began. The will reading had barely finished when Lauren and Brad started tearing into each other over who got what. Voices rising, fingers pointing, accusations flying like knives across the room. They fought over Marie's savings, over the houses, over every last piece of furniture. Not a tear was shed for the woman they were supposed to be mourning. Grief had no place in that room, only greed. Amanda watched them from the corner, silent. She had spent a decade caring for Marie while they lived their lives without a second thought. And now they treated her death like a business transaction. By the end of the day, it was done. Lauren walked away with one of the connected houses on Maple Street. Brad got another. They split the remaining money evenly, like they were dividing scraps at a table. And Amanda, she got nothing but sidelong glances and whispered comments about how foolish she had been. All she had left was a crumbling, forgotten house at the end of Main Street, a place no one wanted, a place everyone assumed would fall apart like she had. That night, Amanda sat on the front steps of that old house, staring out into the dark. The windows rattled in the cold wind. The roof groaned when the breeze shifted. The house, much like herself, felt abandoned and broken. She should have walked away. She should have sold the place, taken whatever money she could, and left Pine Creek behind. But she didn't. Because deep down, Amanda knew this house held more than just peeling paint and cracked floorboards. It was the last piece of Marie's world, the last reminder of the years she had poured her soul into. And something inside her whispered that the real story hadn't ended yet. So the next morning, while the rest of the town moved on, Amanda picked up a broom, opened the creaking front door, and began to clean. She had no idea then that what she would uncover in that dusty old house would change everything. The old house on Main Street creaked beneath Amanda's footsteps as she moved from room to room, broom in hand, wiping away years of dust and forgotten memories. The air inside smelled faintly of old wood and time left behind. The paint on the walls peeled like dry skin, and every corner seemed to sigh under the weight of neglect. Most people would have abandoned that house without a second thought, but Amanda wasn't most people. She wasn't cleaning because she planned to sell it, and she wasn't cleaning because anyone would care. She was cleaning because, after everything she had endured, she couldn't bear to leave the house in ruins. It was the last piece of her past, the last thread tying her to the woman she had cared for through sickness and silence. As the afternoon light spilled through the dirty windows, Amanda crouched down to scrub the floors of the hallway. That's when she noticed it. A faint shift in the floorboard beneath her knee. She paused, frowning. One of the old wooden planks seemed loose, uneven. She ran her fingers over the edges and felt it lift slightly beneath her touch. Her heart began to pound, not with fear, but with something sharper, a whisper of curiosity cutting through the heaviness in her chest. Carefully, she pried the board loose, expecting to find nothing more than dust or maybe an old nail. But beneath it, hidden in the hollow space, was something else entirely. A black plastic bag, tucked neatly in the darkness. Amanda's breath caught in her throat as she pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. Her fingers trembled as she opened the bag, and that's when her world shifted. Inside were neat stacks of $100 bills. Layer after layer of crisp, clean cash. She stared in disbelief, her pulse roaring in her ears. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it, that her tired eyes were playing tricks on her. But no, this was real. $300,000 in cold, hard cash. Amanda's hands shook as she lifted the bundles, her mind racing. Where had it come from? How long had it been there? Why had Marie never mentioned it? As she reached back into the hollow space, something else caught her eye. A small, yellowed envelope, folded neatly at the bottom. Amanda's breath hitched as she pulled it out, the paper fragile beneath her fingers. On the front, in shaky handwriting, was her name, Amanda. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. "Dear Amanda, this money is for you. You were the only one who truly cared. Live your life, sweetheart. Stop waiting for people who never deserved you." Amanda couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The letter shook in her hands as she read it again and again, the words slicing through her like a knife, and then like a balm on every wound she had carried for 10 long years. All the lonely nights, all the bitterness, all the years she had spent invisible, discarded, treated like nothing. In that moment, something inside Amanda cracked wide open. She fell to her knees on the dusty floor, her shoulders shaking as the first sob escaped her lips. The tears came fast, unstoppable, a flood she hadn't allowed herself to release until now. It wasn't just grief. It was everything. The betrayal, the exhaustion, the crushing weight of 10 years spent giving everything and receiving nothing. And now, with one simple letter, Marie had given her something she never expected. Recognition, gratitude, love. Amanda cried until her body gave out, until the house fell quiet again, holding her grief and her relief like an old friend. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, glancing down at the money spread out before her. She had never seen that much money in her life. It wasn't just cash, it was freedom. It was Marie's way of saying, "You mattered." For the first time in years, Amanda realized she wasn't invisible. She wasn't the housekeeper or the unpaid help, or the woman who wasted her life. She was the one person Marie had trusted more than anyone. And her story was far from over. Amanda thought the hardest part was over the day she found the money. She believed that after years of sacrifice and silence, fate had finally handed her a quiet victory, a chance to breathe, to live without fear or burden. But she soon learned that peace doesn't come easily when there are wolves circling. The day after she discovered Marie's hidden treasure, Amanda wasted no time. She knew better than to leave that kind of money sitting inside a crumbling house. She divided the cash into 2 portions, careful and methodical, and made her way to 2 separate banks in town, planning to deposit every last dollar safely out of reach. But as she walked down the familiar streets of Pine Creek, something felt off. At first, it was just a flicker in the corner of her eye. A figure slipping behind a lamppost. A shadow moving when it shouldn't have. She told herself it was nothing. She was just being paranoid. After all, no one knew what she had found. Or so she thought. It wasn't long before whispers started reaching her ears. Small-town talk traveling faster than wildfire. In the grocery store, she overheard 2 neighbors gossiping in hushed tones near the produce aisle. "Did you hear? That old woman, Amanda. Someone said she found something in that house on Main Street. Something big." "Yeah, I heard Brad and Lauren have been sniffing around." Bet they think she's sitting on a gold mine. Amanda's heart tightened. She knew how this town worked. Secrets didn't stay buried for long, and greed had a way of sharpening people's senses. A few days later, her suspicions were confirmed. She caught sight of Lauren's car parked at the corner of her street. Not once, but 3 times in a single week. Brad, who hadn't so much as called her in years, suddenly appeared outside the house, pretending to check his phone, pretending not to watch her through the cracked blinds. The worst part wasn't that they were watching. It was that Amanda could feel it. The weight of their resentment, their anger, their entitlement pressing in like a noose around her neck. They weren't grieving their mother. They weren't mourning the woman who raised them. No, they were circling, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. To them, Amanda had stolen something that belonged to them. But this time, Amanda wasn't the quiet woman who folded under pressure. She wasn't the invisible caretaker who swallowed her pain. She had spent 10 years giving everything, and now that she finally had something to hold on to, she would not let it go without a fight. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and painted the sky in shades of fire, Amanda stood by her front window and watched Brad pacing across the street, phone pressed to his ear. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the sharp glances he threw toward her house. Her phone buzzed a few minutes later. A message from a neighbor. "You might want to be careful. I overheard Lauren at the diner. She's saying that money should have been theirs, that you tricked their mother into giving it to you." Amanda's fingers tightened around the phone. She could almost hear the venom in Lauren's voice. Picture the cold smirk that always followed her sharpest words. For a moment, the old Amanda, the one who bent, who stayed silent, who put everyone else first, almost surfaced. But then she glanced around the house. The cracked walls. The faded photographs of a life spent caring, sacrificing. No more. That night, Amanda sat down at her kitchen table, a pen and notepad in front of her. She began making plans. Not to run, not to hide, but to prepare. Because if the wolves wanted to circle, she would be ready when they pounced. And this time, she wouldn't be the one left bleeding. It was a Thursday night when everything came to light, a night Amanda would never forget. The town of Pine Creek had already settled into its usual hush. The streets were quiet, the shops closed, and the only sounds outside were the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Amanda had just finished washing the dinner dishes, her hands still damp as she moved to close the living room window. That's when she heard them. Voices, low, hurried, angry, drifting from the alley behind her house. At first, she thought it was nothing more than late-night chatter. But something in the tone, something sharp and bitter, made her stop and listen. Carefully, she stepped closer to the open window, her breath held tight in her chest. It was Brad. And beside him, unmistakably, was his wife, Tessa. Amanda leaned forward, her pulse pounding in her ears, as their conversation spilled into the darkness. "I'm telling you," Tessa hissed, her voice slicing through the still night air. "That money should have been yours from the start. She's just an old woman clinging to something that doesn't belong to her." Brad let out a bitter laugh. "You think I don't know that? I spent the last week trying to reason with her. She won't budge. She's too smart to hand it over." Tessa's voice turned colder. "Then stop asking nicely. If she won't give it up, we'll make her." Amanda's stomach dropped. She could barely breathe. Brad hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean we scare her," Tessa said, her tone calm, calculated. "Make her realize how unsafe she is in that crumbling house. Maybe even pay her a little visit when she's alone. Or, if that doesn't work, there's always her grandson." Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. "Ethan." They were talking about Ethan. Brad lowered his voice, but Amanda could still catch every word. "That's too far." Tessa scoffed. "You said you wanted that money, didn't you? Well, I'm done waiting. Either we make her hand it over, or we make her regret holding on to it." Amanda's hands were shaking, but she knew she had to move quickly. She reached for her phone, barely daring to breathe, and tapped the record button. Every word, every threat, they poured into the recording like poison. She kept listening, her heart racing, her eyes wide as the two of them continued plotting. How they would follow her. How they would wait until she was alone. How they might even try to frighten Ethan into forcing her hand. Amanda had spent a decade carrying the weight of others' needs, swallowing her voice, keeping the peace. But tonight something inside her snapped. When Brad and Tessa finally walked away, disappearing into the night like shadows, Amanda stood frozen by the window for a moment longer, the recording still running in her hand. Then she made the call. The officer on the other end of the line was calm, professional. But when Amanda played back the recording, her voice shaking, she could hear the shift in his tone. "Ma'am, this is serious," he said. "You need to come in first thing tomorrow. Bring the recording. We'll file an official report." Amanda nodded, though the officer couldn't see her. "I'll be there." After she hung up, she sat at her kitchen table, staring out into the darkness beyond her window. The fear was still there, crawling beneath her skin, but this time it was tangled with something else. Determination. For 10 years she had stayed quiet. She had let others walk over her, dismiss her, treat her like nothing. But now, the people circling her weren't just trying to steal money. They were threatening the only family she had left. And Amanda wasn't going to let that happen. She sat there until the first hint of dawn colored the sky, the recording safely saved on her phone, her mind sharp and clear. The wolves had shown their teeth. Now it was her turn. Before we continue, I want to pause for a moment and hear from you. What would you do if you were in Amanda's shoes? After sacrificing everything, only to find out the very people you once called family were plotting behind your back? Drop a comment below and tell me how this part of the story makes you feel. Do you feel angry, heartbroken, or maybe inspired by Amanda's quiet strength? I'm reading every single one of your comments, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Now, let's get back to the story because things are about to get even more intense. The night the trap was set, Amanda could feel it in her bones. She and Ethan had just finished dinner at their favorite little diner on the corner of Maple Street. It had been a quiet meal, just the two of them like so many others. Amanda had tried her best to laugh at his silly stories, to smile when he told her about school, but her mind had been elsewhere the entire evening. She could feel something brewing in the air, something dark and heavy. As they stepped out into the cool night, Amanda gripped Ethan's small hand tightly. The streets were empty, most of the shops already closed, the lamplight casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks. "Let's take the shortcut," Amanda said casually, her voice even. "Through the alley." Ethan glanced up at her. "It's kind of dark there." She smiled softly. "It's okay. I'm right here." The alleyway stretched ahead of them like a tunnel of shadows. The air felt colder there, tighter, and Amanda's senses sharpened with every step. She could feel it before she saw them, the electric tension hanging in the air like a wire pulled too tight. Halfway down the alley, a figure stepped out from behind the dumpster. It was Brad. And before Amanda could react, another shape emerged from the opposite end. Amanda instinctively pulled Ethan behind her, her heart pounding but her expression calm. "Well, isn't this a cozy little stroll?" Tessa sneered, her eyes cold and sharp. "Going somewhere, Amanda?" Brad's face was tight, his jaw clenched. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough. Amanda's eyes flicked between them, her hand resting protectively on Ethan's shoulder. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady. "Oh, don't play dumb," Tessa snapped, taking a step closer. "We want what you've been hiding. That money doesn't belong to you." Amanda straightened her back, her gaze unwavering. "It belongs to me because your mother wanted it that way." Brad scoffed. "You think anyone's going to believe that? You manipulated her. You took advantage of her when she couldn't defend herself." Amanda shook her head slowly. "I took care of her when no one else did." The tension thickened, Tessa's smile turning dangerous. "This can end easily, Amanda. Just hand over the money. Or, we make things difficult." Behind her, Ethan clutched Amanda's coat tightly. She could feel him trembling. Amanda took a deep breath, then calmly reached into her pocket. "I wouldn't do this if I were you," she said, pulling out her phone. "Because you're already too late." Tessa frowned. "What are you talking about?" Amanda met her gaze without blinking. "I recorded your little conversation the other night. Every word. And I've already called the police." For a moment, the alley fell silent. Brad's expression cracked first, eyes widening, breath catching. Tessa's face hardened. "You're bluffing." Just then, a sound sliced through the night air. The distant wail of sirens. Growing louder. Closer. Amanda's eyes never left Tessa's. "Keep standing there and you'll hear them up close." Brad glanced over his shoulder, panic flashing across his face. "We need to go." Tessa hesitated, her bravado slipping, but when the sirens screamed louder, she grabbed Brad's arm. "Come on." They bolted down the alley, their footsteps echoing in the dark as they disappeared into the night. Amanda stood still for a moment, her breathing shallow, her hand still holding Ethan close. "It's okay now," she whispered, bending down to meet her grandson's wide, frightened eyes. "They're gone." Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Amanda flagged down the officers, her voice calm, her proof ready. She had spent 10 years swallowing her voice, living in the shadows. Not anymore. That night, as the police took her statement, Amanda realized something she hadn't fully understood until now. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. Because this time, she had the truth on her side, and she wasn't alone. For a few days after the alleyway incident, the streets of Pine Creek felt quieter. Almost too quiet. Amanda thought maybe, just maybe, things were finally settling down. Brad and Tessa had been questioned by the police, their threats exposed. The vultures, it seemed, had scattered. But peace in Amanda's life never stayed for long. Started with a phone call. Amanda was folding laundry when the phone rang, the sound slicing through the stillness of the afternoon. She wiped her hands and answered without checking the caller ID. "Hello." There was a pause. Then a familiar voice. Too sweet, too careful. "Amanda, it's Lauren." Amanda froze for a moment, her heart tightening instinctively. Lauren hadn't called her in years. Not once during all those nights Amanda stayed up caring for Marie. Not when Marie passed. And certainly not after the fight over the inheritance. "Lauren," Amanda said evenly. "Didn't expect to hear from you." On the other end, Lauren let out a soft, almost awkward laugh. "I just wanted to check on you. I heard about what happened the other night. It's awful what Brad and Tessa tried to do." Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. She could hear it, something different in Lauren's tone. "Too light. Too friendly." "I appreciate the concern," Amanda replied, her voice cool. There was a pause before Lauren spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot about Mom. About everything she went through. And about you." Another pause. "You were always there for her." "I never said thank you." Amanda's stomach twisted. She didn't believe this new softness, not for a second. "I'm fine, Lauren," she said simply. "But I doubt that's why you're calling." Lauren chuckled quietly. "Always too smart for your own good." Before Amanda could reply, Lauren added casually, almost like an afterthought. "Oh, and I thought you should know. Chad's back in town." For a second, the world seemed to tilt beneath Amanda's feet. She hadn't heard that name in over a decade. But the man who had promised her forever and walked out without looking back. The man who left her to raise their son alone. Who vanished when things got hard. "What do you mean he's back?" Amanda asked slowly. "He showed up a few days ago," Lauren said. "Says he wants to see you. Maybe make amends." Amanda's throat tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Of course he does." She ended the call soon after, but her mind raced long into the night. And the very next afternoon, as if summoned by her thoughts, he appeared. Amanda was leaving the grocery store, a bag of bread and milk in her hand, when she saw him standing across the street. Time had not been kind to Chad. His hair was grayer, his face worn and weathered, But there was still that same hollow look in his eyes, the same selfishness she remembered too well. For a moment he smiled, as if nothing had changed. "Amanda," he called, stepping toward her. She froze, her heart pounding. She hadn't seen him in 10 years, but her body remembered. The ache, the betrayal, the years of struggle he had left her to face alone. "What are you doing here?" she asked flatly when he reached her. He gave her that old, rehearsed smile. "I just wanted to see how you've been. Maybe fix some things." Amanda stared at him, unmoved. "You disappeared for a decade, Chad. There's nothing left to fix." But in her chest, she knew exactly why he was here. It wasn't regret that brought him back. It was the money. Amanda nodded once, cold and calm, before turning away and walking down the street without another word. Because this time, she wasn't going to let the past walk back into her life so easily. She already knew this ghost hadn't come home to make peace. He'd come back to take what didn't belong to him. After that first encounter outside the grocery store, Amanda expected Chad to disappear again. That's what he'd always done, leave when things got uncomfortable. But this time he stayed. And he didn't come alone. A few days later, Lauren showed up at Amanda's doorstep, holding a box of pastries and smiling like nothing had ever happened. Her voice was soft, her words careful. "I thought I'd drop these off," she said sweetly. "You shouldn't have to cook every day. You've been through so much." Amanda stared at her for a long moment, saying nothing. It didn't stop there. Chad appeared the following weekend, standing awkwardly on her porch with 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thought maybe we could catch up," he said, his voice almost sheepish. "For old time's sake." The days that followed felt like a performance, a carefully rehearsed show. Lauren would drop by offering help around the house, pretending to care. Chad would casually ask about Ethan, making small talk like a man who had always been present, like a father who hadn't walked away 10 years ago. They invited her to lunch, to dinner, to family gatherings that had never existed before. Amanda could see through every smile, every concerned glance. It was all a game. She wasn't naive. She knew the money had drawn them back like moths to a flame. They weren't here to fix broken relationships. They were here because they thought they could wear her down, charm their way back into her life, and her bank account. But Amanda had learned long ago how dangerous it was to trust people who only showed up when there was something to gain. So while they played their parts, Amanda made her move. One quiet morning, she walked into the office of her attorney, a woman she had trusted for years. "I need to set up a trust," Amanda said, her voice firm. "For my grandson, Ethan." Her attorney looked up, surprised. "A trust fund?" Amanda nodded. "Every cent that Marie left me. I want it protected. And I want explicit clauses." They spent hours that day drawing up the paperwork. Amanda made sure every detail was clear. The trust would belong solely to Ethan. He would be the only beneficiary. And, most importantly, there would be legal exclusions, blocking anyone from accessing or influencing the fund, including his father. Her lawyer glanced up at her as they finalized the documents. "You want to exclude Chad by name?" "Yes," Amanda said without hesitation. "And anyone else who thinks they can manipulate me." By the time she left the office, the paperwork was airtight. No one, not Chad, not Lauren, not anyone, could touch that money. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about making sure her grandson's future was safe. About ensuring that no one would ever use him as a pawn the way they tried to use her. That evening, Amanda sat across from Lauren at a local cafe. Lauren chatted easily, asking about Ethan, complimenting Amanda's new curtains, pretending she cared. Amanda smiled politely, sipping her tea. She knew what they were waiting for. The moment she would soften, open the door, let them back in. But that door had already closed. Because while they were busy playing their game, Amanda had written the ending. And in this version of the story, the wolves wouldn't win. It didn't take long for the cracks in Chad's performance to show. For weeks, he kept up the act, showing up with coffee, asking about Ethan, pretending to regret everything he had done. But Amanda saw it in his eyes every time. The hunger, the calculation, the growing impatience. He wasn't here to mend bridges. He was here for the money. Amanda knew he wouldn't be able to keep pretending forever. She knew exactly what kind of man Chad was, the kind who smiled to your face while planning to stab you in the back. And then one afternoon the phone rang. Amanda answered, her voice calm. "Mrs. Amanda Jones?" The woman on the other end asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Bank of Pine Creek. I'm calling to inform you that earlier today, we received a formal request from a Mr. Chad Jones. He claimed to be the legal guardian of Ethan Jones and requested access to the trust fund." Amanda closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle like dust. The banker continued, her voice more formal now. "We reviewed the documentation and the terms of the trust. As per your instructions and the clauses clearly outlined, Mr. Jones's request has been denied. He has no authority over the account." A small, bitter smile crept across Amanda's lips. "Thank you for letting me know," she said. "I expected as much." She hung up the phone and stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street. She had known this moment would come. She had been waiting for it. What she hadn't expected was how good it would feel. Less than 24 hours later, Lauren appeared at her front door. No pastries this time. No sweet smile. No fake concern. She didn't even wait to be invited in. She pushed past Amanda and marched into the living room, her eyes blazing. "You really did it," Lauren snapped. "You locked him out. You locked us out." Amanda folded her arms, her expression calm. Lauren paced like a caged animal, her voice rising. "He thought he could appeal to the bank, that maybe you hadn't covered all your bases. But you did. You wrote us out of everything." Amanda's gaze didn't waver. "You were the ones who thought this would be easy," she said quietly. "But you forgot who I've become." Lauren stopped in her tracks, staring at Amanda like she was seeing her for the first time. For years, Amanda had been the one they overlooked. The housekeeper, the caretaker, the woman in the background. But not anymore. "You think this makes you better than us?" Lauren spat. "You think you've won." Amanda let out a breath, her voice soft but sharp. "This isn't about winning, Lauren. It's about protecting what matters. And you and your brother. You were never part of that." Lauren's jaw tightened. "You're cold." Amanda shook her head. "No, I've just stopped playing the fool." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of everything that had passed between them settling like dust in the room. Then Lauren turned on her heel and walked out without another word, the door slamming behind her. Amanda stood still, the echo of the slam fading into the quiet. She had spent 10 years giving everything she had to people who only knew how to take. And now, finally, she had closed the door for good. The wolves had circled, but they hadn't realized. They were the ones walking into her trap all along. It didn't happen with fireworks. No dramatic exit, no last-minute confrontation. When the dust finally settled, Chad and Lauren simply vanished. One morning, Amanda heard from a neighbor that Chad had packed up his things and boarded a bus out of Pine Creek. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just gone the same way he had disappeared all those years ago. A few days later, Lauren followed, her pride bruised, her schemes crumbled, leaving behind nothing but bitter whispers and a name people no longer respected. And just like that, the noise faded. For the first time in over a decade, Amanda's life grew quiet, but not the heavy, suffocating kind of quiet she had lived with for so long. This quiet felt soft, peaceful, like the gentle hum of something new beginning. She could have locked herself away, retreated into the empty spaces their chaos had left behind. But Amanda wasn't that woman anymore. Instead, she stepped forward. She started small, volunteering at the local community center, joining evening meetings at the library. It wasn't long before women began seeking her out. Women like her. Women who had been overlooked, discarded, used, and left behind. Some were younger, carrying fresh wounds. Some older, their pain buried deep beneath years of silence. Amanda listened. And when they needed it most, she spoke. With the money Marie had left her, Amanda opened a small consulting service. Not for profit, but for purpose. A place where women could come to breathe, to talk, to rebuild. She called it the Second Chance Room. Every Thursday evening, the chairs would fill up. The room would buzz with quiet conversations, tears, laughter. Amanda sat among them, not above them, not apart from them, but as one of them. A survivor. A woman who had been broken and pieced herself back together. And life slowly began to bloom again. At home, Ethan grew taller, his eyes brighter. The shadows that had haunted him when Chad returned faded, replaced by the quiet comfort of knowing he was safe, that he was loved. They settled into a rhythm that felt nothing short of miraculous after the chaos they had survived. There were Sunday afternoons spent baking in the kitchen, flour dusting the countertops as Ethan tried to master his grandmother's old cookie recipe. There were quiet walks through the park, the two of them kicking up fallen leaves, talking about school and dreams for the future. And there were nights when Amanda would pause at the window, looking out at the little town of Pine Creek, the same town where she had once felt invisible, and realize she had built something solid, something lasting. One evening, as the sky blushed purple with the setting sun, Amanda stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup while Ethan chopped vegetables beside her. He glanced up at her, grinning. "Mom," he said casually, "when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you, just like you always take care of me." Amanda's hand paused, her chest tightening in the best way possible. She smiled softly. "Deal." After dinner, they walked together through the neighborhood, the cool evening breeze tugging gently at their jackets. Amanda listened to Ethan chatter about school, about space and stars and the silly joke his friend had told him. Her heart felt light in a way it hadn't in years. Later that night, after Ethan had drifted off to sleep, Amanda stepped out onto the balcony, a cup of tea warming her hands. The streets below were quiet, the lamplight soft. The chaos was gone. The ghosts of the past had finally faded. She stood there for a long moment, breathing in the cool night air, her eyes tracing the familiar shapes of the town that had once felt like a cage. Then, as she turned to go inside, she whispered into the darkness, not for anyone else to hear, but for herself. "I'm home, truly home, in a life I built myself." And for the first time in years, Amanda closed the door behind her without fear, without regret, only peace. And that, my friends, is the story of Amanda, a woman who gave everything, lost almost everything, but in the end, discovered her own worth and reclaimed her life on her own terms. If there's one lesson we can all take away from this story, it's this: kindness isn't weakness. Sometimes the people who seem the quietest, the most invisible, are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens. And when they finally stand up, they stand stronger than anyone ever expected. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this story. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What touched you the most in Amanda's journey? Did this story remind you of someone you know? Or maybe of a moment when you stood up for yourself? Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next emotional, inspiring story waiting for you. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the quietest hearts carry the loudest stories.